I've got a ghost story, so I'm gonna do a ghost story today. Two old men were sitting on a park bench, just watching the world go by, and they got to talking about their beliefs about the afterlife. And they made an agreement between them that whichever one of them got there first would somehow get back and give a message to the other. And as they kept talking, they realized that what they wanted most in the afterlife was to feel young again and be able to play baseball again. So they agreed that they would also try to get this message across. And they sat, and the sun went down, and the leaves rustled in the trees. The sky darkened. One of the guys looked over and realized that his friend had passed away. But just then he heard a voice on the breeze, and it said, "Harry, Harry." And he said, "Carl, is that you?" The voice said, "Yes, yes." He said, "Well, is there baseball in heaven, and do we get to play it?" His friend said, "Well, I've got good news and bad news. Yes, there's baseball in heaven. What's the bad news? You're signed up to pitch next inning." All right. I haven't told that one in a long time. Okay, so today we are talking about Native American attitudes about what Native American peoples call two-spirit people. People who are known to have the spirit of both male and female in whatever balance, whatever combination, but this among the Ojibwa is known as the two-spirit people. The two-spirit, and I should say here, different tribes have different words for this. So this is one expression, but it's an expression from the Ojibwa that's been kind of picked up by other Native American tribes who say, yes, two-spirit is a good way to explain this. As one person said, two-spiritedness embraces the fluid, nonlinear, and interrelated nature of all aspects of one's identity, including gender, sexuality, community, culture, and spirituality. This is very important because in our culture, when we think of gender, we think first, and I think primarily, about like sexual orientation and how that's going to play out physically. But in Native American custom and belief, it's not just about who are you going to love and who are you going to want to marry. It's all of these other things that are related to gender, elements of community, culture, spirituality, and all of this. The belief is that some people are on this border of maleness and femaleness. In some nations, gender variance was understood as a gift, and two spirits were considered to have the power of both men and women, and were often seers, leaders, healers, mediators, or medicine people. So in many Native North American culture, a two-spirit person, instead of trying to hide it and become something that they aren't, they would know, and really the grandmothers would know, and in these Native American cultures, it was generally the grandmothers who were in charge of everything. And instead of trying to hide that person or change that person, they would celebrate that person. They would say, yes, if you are on both sides of this border between maleness and femaleness, then that makes this person ideally suited to things like counseling and therapy, someone who can relate to male and female issues. They often became like shamans, religious leaders, medicine people. Again, there was a belief that if somebody has these elements of multiple genders, then that can give them a greater understanding, and that can give them greater responsibilities. Many times, the specific rituals for children who acted in accordance with a gender that differed from the sex that they were ascribed at birth. Since European colonization, two spirits have been systematically alienated from their identities. Two-spirit practices were driven underground and in some cases eliminated due to a combination of legislation and forced assimilation to colonial gender norms by missionaries. Many indigenous communities now assume colonial notions of rigid binary gender. When the Europeans came, there were so many things in Native American cultures that the Europeans used in order to prove that the natives were primitive or sinful or savage or wild. And so this was one of those things that in many Native American cultures, they said, well, you know, if they're going to come at us about all of these different things, at least this thing we can tone down. And so, interestingly, in the earliest anthropological studies of Native North America, there are many references to two-spirit people. And then around the mid-1700s and the early 1800s, missionaries, anthropologists, they stopped seeing this. Maybe the tribes are not telling them about it anymore. But for whatever reason, we see in the historical records that this really kind of goes underground. When Europeans came to North America, they brought patriarchal and societal traditions with them. And wrapped up in those gender roles were the European understanding of land ownership and inheritance, ideas that were crucial to the process of seizing the continent from indigenous people. Before the Europeans arrived, in most Native North American cultures, it was only women who could own land, even though the land was really owned communally, and nothing was written down. And so the Europeans considered Native American land ownership to be illegitimate because there were not like deeds or maps or contracts. They considered female property ownership to be also illegitimate, something that they did not have to pay attention to. And so even when the Europeans came and tried to buy land from Native Americans, they would not offer money to Native American women. They would only offer it to Native American men. And then when Native Americans started coming to the courts and saying, we need documents to demonstrate our land ownership, they were coming into the courts at a time when women still could not own property. And so it was only men who could do it. Now, what does this have to do with two-spirit people? Male land ownership and inheritance and things like that in the European and the American system. It was assumed that these things would all be done through male relations. And so this is not good news for two-spirit people, because then if they had this other identity, then it would make it even more difficult for them to keep tribal lands within their families. Attitudes toward LGBT people vary across North America's more than 500 distinct indigenous cultures. But a 2015 survey from the National Center for Transgender Equality found that transgender Native Americans experience disproportionately high rates of rejection by immediate family compared with transgender people from other backgrounds. And same-sex marriage remains a point of debate in some tribes. One of the many difficulties facing Native North Americans during the English and American invasion and colonization has been a kind of ongoing gender identity crisis. Before the Europeans arrived, a woman's sense of identity really came from her mother and grandmother, and this land, this relationship with land that she could own and she could work on and that she could pass on to her daughters and granddaughters. And when the Europeans arrived, women could not officially own that property anymore. The property went into male hands, and meanwhile, In most Native North American cultures, before the Europeans arrived, a man could not own private property. And instead of trying to gain respect by amassing a great deal of personal wealth, which he could not do, the primary way that he could earn respect was through his great generosity, was by like hunting a lot and giving everything away, or fishing a lot and giving everything away. He couldn't keep it, he couldn't own it, but he could prove that he was a good provider, not only for himself and the household where he lived, but also for the whole village. And so when the Europeans came, Native American women lost some of their status. Native American men kind of lost this ability to be generous, like when you are on a reservation and everybody is receiving like rations, and those rations would only cover the bare survival. It's not something where you can prove your generosity by giving everything away. And so into this gender crisis comes this other gender identity crisis, where as Native American cultures are still centuries later kind of scrambling to figure out what does it mean to be male, what does it mean to be female, it has brought out this great resentment toward people who are in between or who are both of those genders. So that is really something that has been very harmful to Native American people in general has been extra harmful to transgender Native American people. Native North American people are also an ethnic minority and an economically disadvantaged group of people. And in those groups, not only among Native Americans, but particularly among the poor in this country, there is a far greater rejection and a lot more violence against queer people and transgender people. So being Native American, in addition to that, it leads to a disproportionate amount of rejection and violence toward queer peoples in Native American communities. Stereotypes about Native Americans often conflate living people with ancient cultures. As one Native American said, "We're the only race who's expected to stay exactly the same." And yet there is a good deal of activism and a good deal of affirmation. And in the last few years, these things are really coming into the light and being addressed and acknowledged. Starting in 2018, there has been an annual national Two-Spirit powwow, and that is a spiritual gathering specifically for LGBTQ peoples. Here we see a photograph of people at this powwow, and they have a sign that says, "We feel and express differently because we were blessed with two spirits. We are male and female. We are gay, bi, and straight. It is a gift, and it is a sacred station." And that it is a sacred station, that refers back to those much older traditions in which Two-Spirit people had a very special place within tribal religion. One activist planning the Arizona Two-Spirit powwow said one of the things that they did was they put together a drum circle, and usually in most Native American traditions, the drum circle is only a male thing. And in this, they allowed people of any and all genders to participate. A Native American drum circle is generally defined as a male space, while some dance styles, such as the buckskin dance, are typically performed by women. Early in its history, the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits powwow did away with these gendered rules. In Native American religion, drumming, and what we're seeing here which is going to be different from if you've ever been to a drum circle. Has anybody here ever been to a drum circle, like a place where a bunch of people are drumming? That in the United States, that is generally done on an like an African or a South American model, in which there is a single consistent beat, but everybody with their own drum is doing their own variation. They're all doing something a little bit different, unique. A Native American drum circle is the opposite. It is one drum in the middle, and one person sets one beat with one stick, and anyone who joins it just copies. It is that same beat. So it's not everybody adding different things with their fingers and their thumbs and that. The drum circle, it is there to show that multiple people can share the same heartbeat, that multiple people have the same pulse inside of them, and they have this same connection to the sacred. And so in this, and Native American dances, similarly, are dances that are done in unison. It's something where one person starts it, another person does the exact same dance behind them. Anyone who wants to join can join, but they're expected to be doing the same steps. So drumming, dancing, they are both signs of unity. And this, kind of mixing in male and female and other into the drum circle and into the dance line. It's a powerful symbol of togetherness. An Iroquois author said, Western society has a tortured relationship with sexuality and sex. Indeed, there is a constant and long-standing battle between the spirit and the body. The body, in much Christian thought, is just a temporary vessel for the spirit as it passes through this world. Experiencing the pleasures of the body is seen somehow as a detraction from the real business of life, the development of the spirit in preparation for its rewards in another world. This, in Christianity in particularly, we have this hostility between the spirit and the flesh, between the faith journey and the bodily journey. Whereas among the Iroquois, he writes, we see sex and sexuality as a gift from the Creator to be enjoyed and meant to bring pleasure. This contrasts with the dominant view in the Christian-influenced West of sex as an uncontrollable passion that must be controlled or it will harm, if not destroy, the individual and society. We can see this even if we were reading the first 2 pages of the Bible. On the first page, people are created. God says, be fruitful and multiply. The first thing that people are told to do is get together and make more people. But then on the second page, we start again, and all of a sudden, childbirth is this curse, and it's painful, and it's hierarchical, and it's bad, and they say maybe it results from some kind of sin. This is a very difficult, this is a very unbalanced relationship. In Haudenosaunee creation stories, the Creator's first words to people are very much like these first words in the Bible. Enjoy yourselves and make more people. But there isn't then another story in which the Creator suddenly gets really mad about it. Traditional Aboriginal societies also believed that sexuality was powerful. It awakened at puberty, and in many societies there was a series of rituals for boys and girls which was designed to instill within the individual an understanding of the nature of this power and the way in which this power is to be harnessed and used. These rituals taught men their duties and obligations as men. More importantly, their duties and obligations as sexual beings. They were not to use their sexuality to cause harm to others, and were to respect its power. This belief within Native American societies, instead of just saying like sex is bad and we shouldn't talk about it, they would talk with their children and they would say, sex and sexuality, these things can be creative, these things can be positive, and they can also be destructive. For us, I feel in a society, anywhere you look, it's the people who refuse to talk with young people about sex, where you tend to see the most sexual violence and abuse and all of that pent-up stuff. Whereas there are other cultures where you just sit a 14-year-old down and you say, look, this is what this is, and it's, it's real. In Native American cultures, no one is judged only by their sex and sexuality. People have these parts. That is part of the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual balance of humanness. As one Iroquois writer wrote, a healthy human is one in which these four parts are attended to and for whom these parts are balanced. The idea is that no one part of the human should dominate. We should attempt to develop each of the four areas. Using this idea, then, the notion of sexuality doesn't just have a physical component. It has three other aspects that need to be tended to: intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. Great. Does anyone have any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. And next, I'll be back in a month, and I have no idea what I'll be teaching in a month. So it'll be something. But apparently I've said all I have to say about this. Because that's the end of the lesson. But thank you very much. I will see you. I'll hope to be there at the church anniversary dinner, and I'll see you in June. Thank you. Mm-hmm.